So welcome everybody. Welcome to today's session in this series. Donna is a multi-award winning concert pianist, recording artist, author, performance researcher and philosopher, and master teacher. Today, she will be presenting the second part of our webinar titled Music and Numbers. Just a couple of Zoom rules. We ask that during Donna's presentation that you mute your microphone just so that we have a good audio quality. The chat is open, so please feel free to use the chat for comments and questions and to continue the discussion. And following Donna's presentation, obviously we will open the floor to everybody for discussion and to take your questions. Donna, with that, I will hand it over to you and welcome. It's lovely to have you with us again.
And lovely to be here with you. And as always, I want to thank Eleanor Pete and Maureen Doolin for having me be part of their marvelous Pari Center for New Learning. And one of these days, I'm going to get there in person.
We're waiting for you.
Very much looking forward to that. So let's plunge in because we have quite a lot. And once again, we'll probably won't even get through half of it, but maybe we'll start in with the slides, Eleanor. The series is entitled The Quintessence of Music, and the quintessence, okay, so the quintessence is the so-called fifth element, which was, at least as far as we know, initially postulated by Aristotle as being an element beyond the traditional four elements: earth, fire, air, water, with ether being the element that surrounds all of these. And I like the idea of music associated with ether because I feel when I am engaged in my music practice and study, this is very much an ethereal experience, and also communing, shall we say, with esoteric knowledge, which is another aspect of today's discussion. Let's go to the next couple of slides. We'll get through my how should I put it, my introductory slides. I refer to the Book of Thoth. This is an aspect of the tarot which can be related back to the Kabbalah, which is a very deep form of mystical knowing that based in the Judaic tradition, which I am not born into this way of thinking, and yet it does form part of my ongoing research into the deeper mysteries of the universe, shall we say. And as always, I dedicate this session to Niccolò. Per sempre la mia ispirazione. He was a very, very dear and special friend and mentor to me. And in fact, a couple of people that are here with us today, Daniele, Anita, Bruce, all they know very well who Niccolò is and what he meant to me, and continues to mean to me. Let's continue with the next slide. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I live. I am very privileged to call this beautiful part of the world home, at least for this present moment. In the deep indigenous history of New Mexico, the ancient Paleo Indians, Keres and Tanoan speaking peoples lived here on this land, and there's evidence in the surrounding region of their presence here. And they were raided by the fierce horse Indians, the Comanches. And so let's continue on to the next one. And then I want to introduce to you my dance partner, my beautiful Steinway A, which is just over 100 years old and also to acknowledge the very, very wonderful piano technician, Douglas Parsons, who keeps it in top condition for me. Continuing on to the next slide. So then we come back to this notion of quintessence, the pure, highly concentrated essence of something. And then continuing the fifth and the highest essence, thought to be the substance of the heavenly bodies and latent in all things. And so let's move on. Again, when you get the link to the film, I kind of hoon through the slides, but you can go back to them and study this. And so in some cases, I'm asking, I'm presenting these as a way of stimulating your thinking, and I encourage questions, discussion all along the way here. So I present this page to you. Again, it goes back really to session number 1 for those of you that have been with me for this whole journey that began last year in September. The notion of the interpretation of signs, and at which point we started with the single dot on the page, and then the line on the page, and then the dot on the line, and talking about then how these very simple acts of interpretation are multiplied exponentially in the process of interpreting a musical score, which really is a superimposition of a multitude of these lines and dots. So looking at this page, we can see that once again, we have dots or strokes, and we have lines, and we have combinations of strokes and lines. All of these need to be interpreted in order to be understood, or to create a language, or shall we say, to build up a sense of meaning. And then if we continue to the next slide, and I show the Egyptian because the Egyptian are believed to precede the Greek. So then we come to the Greek numbering system, and this is where it becomes interesting in terms of its relationship to the Hebrew, alphabet and numbering system. Of course, the Greek numbers read from left to right, and you see we have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. We're getting to know these letters really well because of the fact that all of our COVID variants are being named for them. If we move to the next one, which is, I believe, is the Hebrew number system. So again, now we move from right to left, and we see that once again, our names bear very strong resemblance. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, etc. The symbols are, again, if we go back one, and this is where I think you'll be able to, again, when you have the film, and if you want to go back and forth, or you can go to the websites, because I've also given you the website information. If you want to delve more deeply into any aspect of what I'm talking about, certainly feel free to go to the website and do more research on your own. So let's continue. We'll go back, go ahead to, once again, to the Hebrew, and then ahead. So what is very interesting in Hebrew number symbolism, and this, again, this website, I've been studying this, it's like an endless, she not only talks about the numbers 1 to 10, but after you go through this very long discourse about the significance of the Hebrew numbers 1 to 10, then you can continue on to 11 to 20 and beyond. And so again, for me, what's very significant here is that as we talk then about the way that number functions or influences music, or maybe music is influencing numbers. Not sure necessarily which direction. Let's continue on to the next slide. And so the other very fascinating aspect of the Hebrew number system and the alphabet is that because each letter of the alphabet has a numerical value. And so words have numerical values, which are then derived by adding up the numerical values of the individual letters. And again, it's like I relate this to music, because if I'm looking at a single pitch, okay, that has its own meaning to me. Well, I'm going to start with this. Let's say that this pitch has a certain meaning to me, which I won't even try to describe what it is right now. Point is that then if I put another individual sound with it, which has its own individual meaning to me, but then I put them together, it's a whole nother thing. And then if I have another single point, which then join together, and then I juxtapose one against the other. And so now I want to play something for you, because I talk too much before I play. So I'm going to play this. This is Ruth Crawford. And this is her 9th prelude, the final prelude that she wrote, 1924. And I want to read an interpretation of the piece that was created by the very wonderful musicologist Judith Tick. She envisions a program for this work that's drawn from Lao Tzu, from the Tao, or actually I probably mispronounced that. I think it's meant to be Tao. So Judith Tick suggests that in the opening and closing passages, the meaning here is the attainment of the utmost in passivity. And then in the middle section, the myriad things take shape and rise to action, but I watch them fall back to their repose, like vegetation that luxuriantly grows, but returns to the root from which it springs. Perhaps that's ether to earth and back to ether.
Donna, just to interrupt you a moment, they're asking
Yes.
the name and composer of this piece.
Yes, Ruth Crawford, Prelude number 9.
Perfect, thank you.
I introduced Ruth's music, I think, a couple of times before. And even though, like, I'm not getting too focused in the numerical elements that are present in this, although I will point out for those of you that are familiar with the intervals, and as we've talked about before, this particular interval, the major second, is a very important interval in this particular piece, these bass notes. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on that because I want to keep going. So yes, I just wanted to introduce, I just wanted to play something and to bring you into that, also that world of, again, you know, we talk about consonant versus dissonant. Again, some of these concepts I've spoken of in previous sessions. The notion of consonants being that, I mean, just to make it very sort of generic, it sounds pleasant to the ear. Whereas we would maybe say, or most people would say, that this doesn't sound pleasant to the ear. For me, I quite love it, but you know, this is like learning another language too. You learn to appreciate its meaning, even though its vocabulary and grammar might be different than what we're accustomed to. So now let's go on to the next slide because I want to keep going with the yes. If we can go to the next one. Well, okay. Again, this I'm going to leave with you to contemplate on your own. I will go through it just in the sense that, I mean, the opening terminology is drawn from the Tree of Life, and this is also associated with the Kabbalah, which is the very deep mystical form of esoteric knowing of the way that the infinite revolves around the finite. So once again, it's almost like we have the ether surrounding earth, and so we have this duality. So in the Tree of Life, the numbers 1 to 10, as we will see. Actually, let's go to the next one because I think this may be out of order. Now let's go one more. I want you to see the Tree of Life. No, keep going. Now, the Sephiroth is the Tree of Life. It should be the next one. The next slide should show. There we go. So this is one version. I mean, if you go on the internet, you'll find 100 different ways of representing the Tree of Life. This one happens to be in color. If we go to the follow, I think it's the next one after once again, keep going. Here we see how the Tree of Life, which is the 10 the circles represent the 10 emanations of the infinite, or of God, whose name is actually unspeakable. And so we have 10 emanations. We have 4 planes, which is that number 1, Kether, the crown. So this is the ultimate, this is the highest attainment. But in order to reach this, we have 22 pathways to go from number 10 to number 1. And again, you can study this on your own, and the following slides also may be a little bit clearer, showing how the different pathways. And then also for anybody who has any familiarity with the tarot, and I know at least one person who's in the stream who is very, very familiar with the tarot. She's my tarot shall I say, my tarot path sister. The 22 paths to this awakening of this knowledge or this understanding refer to the 22 cards of the so-called major arcana in the tarot, and then the 10 Sephiroth, the 10 emanations, refer to the 10 so-called small cards that are found in each of the 4 suits. And again, this corresponds also the modern playing card deck that people go to Las Vegas. They will see a lot of the 52 card decks, which comprise 4 suits of 13 cards each, ranging from 1 to 10, and then Queen, King, Jack, Queen, King. So we have 13 cards per suit, 52 cards in the tarot. We have the 22 cards of the major arcana, and we have 56 cards in the so-called minor arcana, for a total of 78. Anyway, again, all of this is like for you to sort of, shall we say, contemplate. Can we go back a couple of cards, because I want to go back here. So I just want to, or maybe this is, yeah, these are the associations that are assigned to the 10 spheres of the Sephiroth, with Keter being the top or the crown. If we go back a few more, again, these are the sorts of things to really, one more or two more, even one more. I'm out of it. Yeah, because when we're talking about the way the numerical associations with the tree of life, how they are, shall we say, translated into interpretations of the various cards of the major minor arcana in the tarot, there's a lot. There can be quite a bit of a range, shall we say, of interpretations. The one thing that I want to point out, though, is that my number 5, the quintessence, the 5 card tends to be the single card in the tarot that is particularly challenging. In all of the other numbers of the minor arcana, you will find maybe occasional, especially in the suit of the swords, which you can imagine swords being, just, again, they can hurt you. And generally the swords are cards of, tend to be rather sad cards, but the number 5 across the 4 suits. And I think that I have, again, further on, sorry, this is where when I start talking and my, no, go back again to the 5, one more. So the number 5, I wanted to talk about the number 5 again, more specifically, because certainly in music, this is a very significant numerical value, because as I explained or described the last time, how from the harmonic series we have the fundamental, which is if I choose this as my fundamental, I will play it. I won't make it sound audibly, because when I play the note exactly 1 octave above it, it activates the string to vibrate at that frequency, which is double the frequency of the fundamental. And when I go a perfect but then I go the next interval that I break down into in the harmonic series is the fifth. You can probably hear that. And this interval is so very, very important in Western European art music, because the interval of the fifth then became a harmonic feature of the Western European art music approach to creating structure, because everything really revolves around the tension between this fundamental or tonic and the chord that's built on the dominant, which creates this sense of tension and a need to resolve. So seriously, if you want to boil down every piece of Western European art music to its quintessence, it is 1-5-1. And this is where the dissonant music creates some issues for the listener, because you don't necessarily have this traditional approach to creating the sense of musical tension. So we need to find other ways of doing it. And so again, just going through the number 5. So in the Buddhist tradition, we have, I mean, the Buddhists are fantastic because, you know, there are numbers for everything. We have the three, hang on. Oh, why am I forgetting? Never mind. We'll just talk about the deadly poisons: anger, jealousy, pride, ignorance, attachment. The Chinese actually have 5 elements instead of 4. They add wood as an element. And then once again, going into the talking specifically about the 5 in the tarot, the small card divinations, which again, interpretations do vary, but this is from the Crowley interpretation. The 5 of Swords represents defeat, the 5 of Cups, and cups are associated with emotion and water. 5 represents emotional disappointment, and in the Wands, strife, anxiety, frustration, and discs, or sometimes called coins, worry or physical concern. So let's keep going. Again, I'm throwing stuff out there for you to contemplate on your own. And should we go? Let's go ahead to the next slide, because I want to move on. And again, if anybody has anything they want to throw in at any point, please. The Kabbalah has a very, very close association to the tarot. And again, you can read through this. I decided that rather than try to explain it on my own, I would use the Encyclopedia Britannicus. At least and again, there's much bigger discussion of this at that website. Okay, so let's go ahead to the next slide. And so from the Kabbalah comes this tree of life. This is again the way of contemplating the relationship between God and man, finite, infinite, the Sephiroth, and so again representing the 10 emanations or powers. And let's continue. And we've seen this. Let's keep going. Keep going. And once again, keep going. This is another version of what we just looked at. So let's keep going. Again, you can go. So then we come also to the relationship between the 7, well, again, the number 7 and the 7 planes of the Sephiroth, 7 pitches of the diatonic scale. chakras. And again, these can also be related very specifically to the tree of life. And I'm not going to sit here and try to do that for you, because again, all of this stuff is like a lifetime worth of study, contemplation, and just in a sense experiencing the relationships between all of these elements. For me, because as a musician, I am always searching for meaning in everything that I do, every sound that I make, and sometimes I will experience it in the throat chakra, sometimes in the root chakra, sometimes I'm experiencing it as Kether, crown. It's like it's so very amazing, what happens to me when I'm playing the piano. I can't begin to describe it. This attempts to describe it. Okay, so let's keep going. Yeah, so I just demonstrated to you this harmonic series and explained again how these intervals, and I will maybe just kind of talk about this again a little bit more, because again, intervals are very important in terms of the way they will influence the consonance versus dissonance of the oral experience. So if I'm playing a chord or a simultaneity that is considered to be consonant, then I am actually playing intervals that are considered to be consonant. And these are the intervals that tend to be occurring earlier on in the harmonic series. As again, I explained already, the octave, the perfect fifth, and the perfect fifth, which then inverts, because we have this notion of we can either go forward, we can go backward, we can go upside down, we can go upside down and backward. So as we're moving in, so shall we say, the direction, or the original direction, we have the perfect fifth. But if we flip that interval over, it becomes a perfect fourth. So these two intervals are kind of a mirror of each other. The next interval that we come to, as you can see on the screen, between 4 and 5. This is the interval known as the major third. Also, interestingly enough, in the Middle Ages, this interval was not considered to be consonant. That actually took a little while for the third to be accepted as a consonant interval. The next one that we hear is the minor third. So it's one. So in other words, to find that major third, if you just have a piano, play your first note, call it 1. Actually, in set theory, which is another thing we'll talk about maybe in a couple of years' time, this would be pitch 0. So then you go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's considered the interval of 4, or the major third. The interval of 3 in set theory is 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's one integer, one pitch, one, oral element tighter than the major third. And then we have another minor third. Then we get into the smaller intervals, which are the intervals that are definitely, if I were playing stuff like, say, this, again, it's maybe not the most terribly dissonant sound you're ever going to hear, but it's more dissonant than, say, than this, because I have instances of these seconds, or the flipped over version of the second, which is the seventh. So 4 inverts to 5, 3 inverts to 6, 2 inverts to 7, the unison, or 1 inverts to 8 the octave. So you always end up in that sense with the number 9. So that said, I want to play something for you now. This is Arnold Schoenberg. Now, Arnold Schoenberg is a very interesting composer. As we travel through the 19th century, the traditional harmonic system, which is based on that 1-5-1, toward the end of the 19th century, composers were, I think they're starting to feel a little bit caged in, and they're adding more and more dissonant, or sounds that are traditionally considered to be dissonant, enriching their vocabulary, but at the same time, they're creating a lot of stress on the 1-5-1 harmonic system. Schwernberg started out life 1874, writing very tonal music, but huge pieces. They would use massive forces and go on for a very, very long time. This is sort of, again, what was happening is the forces were getting larger, the pieces were getting longer, and it was almost as if we were reaching a crisis point. And in fact, a crisis point was breached, and 1908, this was the famous year that Arnold Schoenberg decided that he could no longer function within the confines of the common practice period, or the traditional harmonic structure. And I'm going to play this piece, which is rather famous. Anybody who goes to music school is going to probably learn about this piece in theory 1, or maybe 3. It's the second of the Sechs kleine Klavierstück. This is the film actually has a slide that has all of the titles of the pieces and the composer. This is Arnold Schoenberg, 6 short pieces, Opus 19. And sorry, I forget the year he wrote these. It's on there. It's like, this was not 1908. These came a little bit after. But what is interesting in this piece is he's using the interval of the third. And this interval is quite generative in terms of how it creates the structure of the piece, which again has no, shall we say, discernible 1-5-1, and yet he does create tension in various ways. I think, let me play it for you first, and then we can talk about it. And I'd be very, very pleased if all of you would then, in your thinking, write it down, put it in the chat, your observations about the way this composer, Schwernberg, is using this very different language, which is, again, quite dissonant, and yet he still manages to create the sense of tension, release. But how does he do it? Because he's not doing it in the traditional way. Well, thoughts. That's okay. Here are my thoughts about. He creates tension right from the get-go. This is very tense. This, and it's a consonant interval. All right. However, by the time he's introducing his new pitches, let me also point out that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of these pitches which do not, again, necessarily spell the sort of scale that you would associate with diatonic consonant music. And by the time we get to the, let's see, he keeps adding pitches. So this is again. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then here's 9, 10. And then we don't get pitch 11 until a little bit further on. The pitch 11 comes here. Is this pitch. And then pitch 12. Would you believe it comes right here? Right at that moment where, again, we have a simultaneity of 6 pitches all together. It's the only place in the piece except for the very end. But even there, the very last sound, even though it's 6 pitches, they don't sound all together. This is the only place where we get that. Plus, we have that increase in volume, which creates, again, has it a way of creating tension in, or shall we say, intensity, which is a form of tension. But the very static nature of this, to me, is also very tense. And so I'm listening to this. I could be doing this. You see, and you don't know where it's going. No sense of where it's going. It is sitting there, static, stationary, immovable. It's a bit like Ruth's stillness. So then he breaks the stillness unexpectedly with this sudden outburst. Which then, it's like the Crawford. It returns to the repose, but it's been changed. It's been transformed because now we add this minor third interval onto this. So we have this surge up and back. And we think, okay, we're back to this. But not quite, because then he has, again, more action here. And then this rising gesture, because for the most part we've had descending gestures. This descending. He moves across and way down, crossing over. Again, going down. Now he's going to rise up. We return to the stasis in the top, but now in the bass, we have this series of descending thirds. So the third stays static in the top. Whoops, sorry, wrong sound. The descending aspects tend to suggest decay or dissolution or perhaps closure. If you're hearing this piece for the first time, you're going to go, oh gee, what was that about? But maybe if I play it again for you in its entirety after this bit of discussion, see how you experience it this time. See if it means something different. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything at all, but he ends this high D, which was also, and with the F sharp, which are features, and the B natural here, features of this. So again, creates maybe closure through this sense of referring back to this opening. But once again, we are dealing with a very, very different kind of music making, a different language, a different way of setting up, shall we say, expectation, and then maybe relieving them, setting up tension, relieving the tension. I wanted to introduce that piece to you because Schwernberg is the person, the composer, who is credited with having created what's called the 12-tone system. I'm looking at the time. No, we're good. I just want to hold on. Let me go and scroll through my slides here. See if I've got. Eleanor, could we could go to slide number 26, please? We just scroll down. There. No, back one more. Back one more. There we go. Yeah. So I showed you how Schwernberg in that piece, which is considered to be what we would call, there's some people refer to it as atonal, meaning with the letter A referring to the absence of tonality. Others refer to it as pan-tonality, in other words, all embracing, in other words, all tones equal. I prefer that version because to me, it's still, for me, it's still a very tonal language. And, but the thing is that he introduces the 12 pitches, but not in a particularly orderly. It's orderly, but that when he decided that in order to really avoid a sense of tonality by avoiding repetition of a single pitch, which then tends to create that sense of home, because even this has this sense of being a core or a center or it is the place of repose in that sense. The Crawford piece that I played, her approach to avoiding tonality is to use at least 7, usually more than 7, usually more like 9 pitches of the chromatic scale, which is the 12. And you may briefly have seen the 12 signs of the zodiac. So again, this is from previous webinars, diatonic scale 7. And if we use all of the pitches all of the keys that we find on the piano, we have 12 different pitches of the chromatic or the so-called or chroma color scale. And Schwernberg decided that maybe what he could do to avoid having any single pitch reiterated and creating a sense of home or tonal center, that he would organize these 12 pitches into what he calls a row. And so now we're going to move into this next zone. Are there any questions or comments? Does anybody want to chime in here? I mean, you're all being very quiet, but I'd love to hear from you if you want to say anything. And you don't have to, please don't feel obliged to. I was just going to say, Eleanor, do we want to have a short 3-minute? Do we want to take 3 minutes here near the top of the hour for everyone to stretch their legs?
Yeah, of course, Donna. Yeah, we can take a 3-minute break and be back on the hour.
Yes. All right.
Wonderful.
We'll do that. And then we're going to dive into 12 tone music. Woo!
Sounds wonderful.
Hello, Victoria.
That's Valjean. Are you gonna say hi to
Valjean? Hello.
And there's Whoopi. There's Whoopi.
I reversed the camera. She's down there. Let me just see.
Hi, Whoopi.
Hi.
She's asleep after dinner. Yes. I have a question. Why does anyone want to create tension? There's enough of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I
Eleanor?
Yes,
Eleanor?
hello. Hi, Sharon.
I'm so sorry. I'm holding my iPad in one hand and I can't communicate. And I'm so frustrated. And but I decided it doesn't matter. I'm just going to absorb it. But there's so much interconnection in things I've been studying, like the Kabbalah, which I didn't know why I was drawn to.
Just if there's something, if you'd like to contribute, just jump in. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I won't jump in today because until I get this communication thing, I can't believe I'm here and you're clear and I'm holding up one little iPad and I can't, you can't get, I'm frustrated in that I can't communicate.
I can imagine.
Sono qui, veramente sono
But
qui.
if you do want to contribute at all, please just jump in. Donna would love to hear back from the audience. So
I just am so interested in how she cannot go down the rabbit hole in explaining it to somebody, how she's able to kind of wrap it together, because each one is an esoteric study. And that how did she become the vessel for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I ask myself that every day.
Oh, it has to be a bigger picture. It has to be from the greater, like the Greeks or the Egyptians, you know, the whole thing with it added the soul, it's a soul thing.
It is a
It,
soul.
it,
It is a soul
It,
thing that.
it's the constant, it's the constants that you've tapped into. It's a,
Thank-
yeah, no, it's genius. And I've watched friends who are musicians and that play a harpist who is and does geometric hard edge work in her sculpt. She cuts paper and comes from a Russian background and a constructivist, and she gets that. She's so in the head and has all things. And I used to go and lie on the couch, and she would play harp for me. So when I was going to her for a studio visit in the art community. So anyway, that's thank you so much for doing this and being here. And I can't believe I'm back in Bella Italia.
Ah, sei molto fortunata.
It's so I understand. I get the feeling. It's the same feeling I get going back through time and connecting with Italy. It's that. It's the heart of it. The cuore. There's something transcendent about places where I feel elevated, and Italy always has been for inspiration and all of it. And now we're tying America into it too, bringing it home.
Well,
Thank
that's a very interesting term, home. Um, I mean, I'll touch on that because I think that, you know, the bigger picture is really about that, isn't it? It's about uh, the home of the soul and where is
Yes.
that? And for
Yeah.
me, and I'll just give you a very brief little story about that. Was it 3 years ago when I was in Melbourne, which is my second home, and I was giving a concert. I was playing Charles Ives's Concord Sonata, which you have played parts of in previous webinars. And again, that could be the topic or the subject of an entire 2-hour session sometime. If folks are interested, just let me know. This piece has been a very big part of my life for a very, very long time. And you know, people that know that I've lived in Italy, that I've lived various places in the United States, and certainly have spent a huge chunk of my life in Australia as well, will ask me, well, where is home? And I said on that particular occasion, I said, home for me is Charles Ives's Concord Sonata. It's in the music. And I would say that any piece of music that I'm playing for me is home at that point when I am playing that music. That is home. And I
Yes.
think this is why I say music is the cure. And I gotta say that music is probably the only thing that has kept me breathing and surviving and not going totally over the edge in these last 2 often horrific years. So thank you, Sharon. Oh, and
Oh,
Paul,
tanti grazie.
did you have something you wanted to say, or are you just giving me the thumbs up? Hello.
I will have
Beautiful.
I will have to leave at about
Oh,
10 minutes.
okay.
I can only say, if I could only speak Italian, I would say that in Italian. I am so grateful. This is so outrageously wonderful. I am a person who has wondered about Charles Ives and Veyburn and Berg and all of that for a long time. And you are, for the first time in my life, making it all meaningful, and more than meaningful, not just, oh, I kind of get this. It's way beyond that. I need to thank you.
You're making me cry. Thank you. That's just beautiful. Thank you. And Paul, you can hear. You'll be able to see the film, and so then you'll be able to connect in with the Veyburn. Yeah.
That's an Italian gesture.
What did you say in Italiano? See what?
That is, as far as I know, a gesture that I think originated with the Italians. Who,
Oh.
Fantastico.
Yeah. Okay.
Donna, can we let Carol come in? She's had her hand up.
Yes, of course.
Carol, please come in.
Hello, Carol.
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you. I really want to be able, like, I missed a couple of these and I so would like to go back to them. They're just fascinating. This is an incredibly naive question, and I don't expect you to be patting me on the head at all. I mean, it's just literally that I keep thinking about it, and I feel safe enough here to sort of ask. From the time I was a kid, I loved banging on the piano. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I loved listening to the shifts, like changes in tone and differences in rhythms. And I've always loved doing that. And I do it by myself because my senses, my brother used to go off and close the door and everybody would leave. So what's sort of funny is sometimes when I listen to these composers, I feel like they're doing the same thing I was doing, only they're coming at it, with all of this incredible skill and artistry and knowledge and years of study. So I cannot possibly say I'm anything like that. And yet I kind of wonder if there's some place where we met in the middle, where we're just listening to the pure sound. And I don't know. So I'm not even sure there's a real question there. It's just this funny sort of thing about allowing myself permission to enjoy my own exploration on the piano, knowing that I in no way can, if someone says, can you play the piano? I'm like, no, not at all. So it's just that kind of funny question of, anyway, I'm not, yeah.
I'm going to say that you are a composer every bit as much as Charles Ives or any other composer.
Well, except that I can't remember what I did. I could never do it twice. And this is the thing, their ability to write it down.
Well, I think that's the discipline aspect. I think that's something that you would learn how to do, that you would learn how to remember. And there are ways that you would be able to learn how to remember. And then if you want to write it down, these days you don't even have to physically write it down. There are keyboards that will do that for you. You play it.
It's really, really interesting because, like,
on the keyboard, and and there's a software notation program built in, and it will print it out for you.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because in a sense, it feels to me very much the closest thing it relates to in my life is meditation. And sometimes when I go back and listen, like I've started now because it's so easy recording things occasionally, and I'll see where I'm not in a clear enough state, so I've kind of gone too quickly, or I haven't left enough space, but it's all very intuitive feeling stuff. It's not, it doesn't come out of any knowledge place. So, and then another little piece I wanted to mention, you probably heard this story. They actually had the obituary in the New York Times a few years ago of this cat who belonged to a composer. And the cat went running along the keyboard, and the composer said, oh, there was something that caught the composer's. Anyway, he wrote down the music the cat had, and he sent it into this competition for a 1 minute. There was like a 1 minute sort of piano piece competition. And he sent it in with the cat's name, but he didn't say it was a cat. And the cat, I don't think it won first prize, but it did win honorable mention. And there was a point when the cat's composition was actually played in, I don't know if it was Carnegie Hall. So, the cat became sort of famous for having, created something by accident, which the composer was able to capture. And I was so tickled by that because I felt like a real kinship with the cat. But thank you. That's reassuring. At least I don't feel like I'm a complete lunatic when I'm going on.
No, not at all. We're all lunatics.
And because I love listening to this kind of music, like it speaks to me very strongly. It feels really natural when I hear it. It's like I feel like I understand what the composer's doing, but again, on an intuitive level. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Come in again, Paul. Yeah, come in.
I apologize for being wordy. At the Grammy Awards, John Batiste, who won, or I forgot what it was, Best Album of the Year, was making exactly the same point that Dr. Donna is making about, I'm getting a prize, but everybody in this room is, he didn't say of equal talent, but everybody in this room has talent. And I'm so grateful for that notion and for Dr. Coleman reinforcing it, that if you did nothing more in your childhood, then I remember my grandson coming to visit us, and on the piano upstairs, he took his arms like this and as hard as he could to make as much noise as he could. And I thought, oh man, Austin. His brother sat down, eventually took lessons, and made me spellbound by playing Pachelbel's Canon. Two different young teenage boys, and they both belong. I have to shut up. I gotta go. Thank you so much. I hope the recording.
And here's a version of someone, you might think of it as banging around on the piano, but exaltation. So again, America in the 20th century, we had composers who were actually taking that so-called banging around on the keyboard and turning it into legitimate pieces of music. Now, I mean, we can keep going with the discussion, or I can go and we can save a little bit of it for after I've introduced the 12-tone row. What would you like to do? I mean, really, it's...
Well, if nobody else has any more comments, you can
For
continue.
right now, we can always jump back in. I'd like to be able to at least bring in this next aspect of the 12-tone way of composing, and the first composer that I'm going to introduce to you then in this regard is Riccardo Mali Piero, an Italian. And as you can see from the title, Invenzioni, and again, this is all in the slide on the film that has all of the repertoire listed with dates, composers, names, dates, etc. Let me just click onto this so that I can, yeah, this is Invenzioni number 7, written in 1949. But before I play this piece, which is based upon an ordering of the 12 tones of the chromatic scale into a row, and this row is a very interesting one. It's pretty much just a straight up scale, as it were, and yet it's not a scale like you've ever heard before. So this is what we call the original version of the row. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this is where our numbers become important, because this is now pitch number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. These pitches are then, by a very interesting process that we call turning it into the so-called magic square, which I will talk a little further about with the next piece, because I've actually created the magic square for the Veyburn. Not for this one. I didn't really have to do that because Mali Piero, he created these pieces as didactic, sort of in the same way that Bach created his well-tempered clavier and his Invenzioni, which he created a series of 2-part and 3-part inventions. And I'm going to play, because the Mali Piero Invenzione that I'm going to play for you is based upon a Bach Invenzione or Sinfonia 3-voice. It's effectively a study in counterpoint, which is again the note against note, punctus contra punctus, counterpoint. In this case, we have 3 levels of conversation going on. And for the most part, everything is happening in 2-bar entities. And I'm going to play the first. The voice that appears first is in the bass. And this one actually has a very chromatic descent. And so here we have Bach, who's already encroaching on the 12 tone, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different pitches. And they're all very tight, and they're all dissonant intervals, the minor second. On top of that, our second voice, and what might be considered to be our main thematic material, is this 3-note idea or 3-note motive, which is again generative in the structure. The intervals in this 2-bar phrase. Once again, there's the third, but it falls back after rising up. It falls back by a minor second. Then he repeats the idea, but a slight bit higher. Same minor third, falls back. Then he introduces, again, for those of you that have been with me before, the Diabolus in Musica, the tritone. This is the interval, the augmented fourth, that actually precisely subdivides the scale. So again, if you have a piano, and you know what C's are, start on an octave C and move in. Up at the F sharp, and which you'll see is the interval that exactly subdivides the scale. This is considered the most dissonant of all. So here we have Bach, who's writing this piece in the 1700s, and this piece actually has so many very dissonant elements, and yet it's not considered to be a dissonant piece of music. Our third idea that he introduces then in the 3rd bar is, again, comes in the bass. And again, a lot of very tight intervals. We have that minor second, very tight, kind of dissonant feel, and then he ends up on, yet again, 2 minor seconds. So, and at the cadence, which is the concluding, and this is where we hear the 5-1. Okay, this is where here 5-1. So we've sort of come to rest on that particular well, it's a different key than the opening, but I'm not going to try to explain all of that to you. So here's what they sound like. We only hear the 2 at the start. Now I add the 3rd in the bottom. Of what I would call expositions, in which these 3 ideas are very clearly presented in various juxtapositions. Either the first voice that we heard gets moved into the middle or onto the top. This is what we call invertible counterpoint. So something I heard on the bottom at the very beginning is now heard in the middle voice when I get to the second exposition. So this bass, I'm going to play a little louder. Now it's up here. Okay, and then what I heard here is still on the top. Later on, we're going to hear again all different versions of this. The chromatic descending voice can be in the very top, for example, over here. The main, what we might think of as the main voice, which is what we hear here, now is in the middle. Of Bach too is the way he takes a minimal amount of material and he creates an entire very wonderful piece of music out of it. I want to play it for you because then I want you to hear how Malipiero used this as his inspiration for creating a piece with the same name but with a very different vocabulary, very different musical language. And again, the sense of expectation, tension, release is created in different ways, particularly in the Malipiero, principally through dynamic, but also through a sense of rising tessitura and descending. The rise fall. You go up and you're hanging up there, and there's a sort of tension about it, even though it's exciting and wonderful, but still you need to come down. So there's kind of that going on. Maybe it's a universal, sometimes we go against that grain, but I think we find that in general, again, Western European art music tends to follow that, shall we say, structural or directional paradigm. All right, here we go. This is Bach, technically known as Sinfonia, but 3-part invention, number 9, F minor, Johann Sebastian Bach. I don't know why I love 12-tone music and this language so much. I was talking with a friend, a composer, musician, pianist. Actually, he was another one of Nicolo's proteges, Eric Santos, who I don't know if Eric, he's probably not in the stream because he's teaching, but and we were talking about this dissonant musical language, and I just remember saying to him that in some respects it's not that I prefer it, but there's something liberating about it, because it's like you have fewer expectations. It's like each moment is its own event, each interval, like this movement from here to here. And it's like the way that a resolution will almost suggest itself, but it's not according to any, shall we say, learned principles. There's something quite marvelous about that for me. And anyway, so that is 12-tone music. And I will also just point out to you, because I didn't give you a very thorough tour of this, but the thing that's really fabulous about this, and if you are a musician, you have access to this material. It's not that easy to come by. This music, this actually is, yeah, probably the original first edition. But what we have in the 3 voices here, he's actually told us whether he's using, and now I think what I need to do is to introduce to you the notion of the row, that we can have the row again forward, and I'll just use the 12 pitches of the chromatic scale as an example. Let's say that's our row. That's going to be our original or prime version of the row, and it will, whatever pitch we start on, that is considered the prime version. So our prime version of this row is going to be starting on the pitch C. I can invert that row so that I can turn it literally upside down. That version of the row, again, starts on the pitch C, but instead of going up, goes down. So all of the intervals are mirrored in reverse. Okay, so that's my inversion of the row. Then I can also, in this particular case, is sort of like, it's a bit of a, how would I say, it's a redundancy, because in this particular case, my reverse version, my retrograde version of the row is going to be, well, actually, no, it's not a redundancy, because my reverse or retrograde version of my row is going to start on the pitch B, whereas the inversion is going to start on the pitch C. So I actually misspoke there. And then the retrograde inversion, in other words, the version of the row that goes backwards and is upside down. So we have these 4 matrices against which then we can create what's called the magic square. And I love doing these. And the first trick, of course, also is to find the prime form of the row, which isn't always that easy. And I like to do it myself. I mean, these days you can just go online and practically find magic square for any piece of 12-tone music, but I like to dig it out myself. And once I've done that, then can we please go to the slide, Eleanor? Slide, that'll be slide number 27, I think, be the next one. Okay, so, oh no, the one that right here, yeah. So this is the magic square. This isn't my version of the magic square. This is somebody else's. Again, you can look him up. Jonathan Garcia Bourbon has created this version of the magic square. My magic square looks a little bit different, but because I actually chose a different starting point for my prime row, but the point being that you can see that we have this, literally this matrix in which we have the prime form of the row, and he's got them running down the left side, the inversions running across the top. The R's represent retrograde, and the RI represents retrograde inversion. The reason I want you to see this is because we now have 144 different versions of the row, and this then forms the basis of the language. And so Mali Piero has been very, very generous with us, and again, because these are meant to be didactic, so he's actually told us what form of the row he's using. So just this is the prime or original version. So, okay, remember I played that for you. The original form of the row just goes straight up. Well, he doesn't necessarily just keep going straight up. He actually dips down to create a little bit of variety. Then the bass voice is an inverted retrograde form of the row. All right, but again, it's not like so obvious, and that's what's beautiful, is that because the composers will add rhythmic elements and then use their imagination to create these larger structures, but they're not always using the single form of the row. They have all of these options for, and then as you can see, there are many instances where, for example, if you look at the very top row, where it says P0, and you see the letter C and then C sharp A, go absolutely right to the diagonal at the bottom corner where you have the R5, retrograde 5 version, and you see that that's also starts on the letter C, or the pitch C. And what composers will do is that they will use, for example, that C as the starting pitch, and they will wrap around, okay? And you're like, they'll use that as a sort of like a dovetail point. There's so many ways, so many ways. And then we also have composers that divide the row into 2 groups of 6, and this is known as hexachordal use of the row, juxtaposing 6 against 6. In this particular case, he's using the entire row. So the other composer whose music is very significant, and for which this magic square and the one we're looking at is the Anton Veyburn Variationen Opus 27. This is the first movement only of this set of 3 pieces that Veyburn composed. Veyburn was one of the 3 most important students of Arnold Schoenberg. Anton Veyburn and Alban Berg. Actually, I'm making a mistake. It's like the 2 most important composer students of his. I'm thinking Schwernberg, Berg, and Veyburn as the 3 members of this so-called Second Viennese School. What is interesting, and I'm gonna, so my version of his prime row is, now what am I doing here? Why does this not look correct to me? Yeah, is this, is. And you think, oh yeah, we're gonna create a piece of music out of that. Well, what's interesting about the way that he uses his 144 versions of that prime row is that he's actually doing these very interesting things where he'll go in forward motion and wrap around and go in retrograde. And so he creates a series of palindromes throughout this piece, which the entire piece is palindromic. And so let me just give you an example of what that, it's like the word radar, for example, palindrome, R-A-D, and then I go back out, retrograde. So here's my first palindrome, and I have pitches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now this is my meeting point. This is my dovetail, because now I'm going to go backwards. But interesting that he's also already gone backwards, because this, and then what happens in the bottom voice is actually already a retrograde. It's hard to explain and maybe even more difficult to hear, but I think you can hear, or at least I will show you where some of these other palindromes are, and so that maybe you'll be able to hear them when I play. So the next little phrase, the palindrome, so the middle of our palindrome is here. So you heard me go, and at the end, so he goes up in the top, down in the bass, then here's my middle, then backs out. That's a very short palindrome, 3 bars. Now, and again, this is more obvious because we have the repeated note. So that's, and then I repeat this, and now I'm going backwards. And here's another tiny palindrome, which is the same as this, the one we heard earlier, this. He does it again, but it's rhythmically slightly different. Okay, next palindrome is here. And this is, you can even see it visually because I switch. I'm crossed hands and now I'm uncrossed. That's the center of that palindrome. Crossed hands, repeat, backwards. So I go up and now I go down and back to here. And here I finish that palindrome. Here's another one. Okay, so flip around. And here's the next one. Here's another one. Again, the left hand just does this. So I have this and backwards. So another one here. It's like I rock on that. And here's another one. Rock. Sorry. So you get the idea. And I won't demonstrate the palindromes in the very end. It's again, short piece, kind of 3 main sections. The opening, again, a bit like the Ruth Crawford piece, the opening tends to be a little bit more on the still, calm side. The middle section, much more activity, much more action, faster moving notes, a lot more jumping around, and certainly the crossing of the hands. And then we return to the opening section. So it creates a kind of, again, structural balance. But again, we are operating in a very different musical language, the language of 12 tone, pan tonality, avoiding the sense of home by avoiding repetition of pitches. Movement 1, Variationen für Klavier Anton Veyburn, Opus 27, composed in 1935. And of course, palindromes are also geometric figures. We have palindromes in all kinds of visual structures. So interesting then to hear palindromes in this music. And I'm just conscious that we are running out of time, and I very much want to introduce to you the fabulous Italian composer Luigi Dalla Piccola, who also wrote stunning music using the 12-tone system, and once again the magic square, all worked out. I have so much fun creating these. It's like, as you can see, it's like I've got the matrix going all. And so once I have all of these rows figured out in all these versions, then I can go through with my colored pencils and I can identify all of the different versions of the row, which I find for me is very useful, this form of analysis. It helps me to, again, it gives me an insight into the composer's, shall we say, modus operandi. The composer will tend to use, as Veyburn definitely has used the row in a very specific way. All of the palindromes are comprised of a single version of the row, and so there's a unity in the way that the structure that he builds up, the structure of that particular piece. This is a bit, of a different version of a 12-tone composition. Quaderno musicale di Anna Libera. Anna Libera was his daughter, and the quaderno, or the musical notebook, for Anna Libera that he composes for her 8th birthday in 1952. We also have in there this motivic idea, which he repeats throughout the piece, which is actually the so-called Bach motive. Again, this is using pitch names, pitch names to, or deriving a series of pitches from letters. So again, this is like, say, maybe the reverse of not the gematria so much, but just the Hebrew letter number system, where letters and numbers they correspond. So here we have the right at the beginning, and then we have it here in this little place. He's actually turned it upside down, again inverted it, so it's in the middle voice. And here it's more obvious. Okay, and I just have to play one more of these. I have to play this very beautiful Andantino Amoroso e Contrapuntus Tertius. It's a three voice crab canon. And this is like, again, one of the very interesting things, kind of goes back to the Middle Ages, and even Veyburn's invocation of the palindrome, there's something sort of Middle Age composition where they like to weave puzzles into their music. In this particular case, we have our row presented 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? And then we have 12, and then it goes in retrograde. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Different version, but it's still a retrograde version of the row. We go through this, and then he brings in the second voice in retrograde. And so we actually have it going forward and backward at the same time. So in a sense, it's like a gigantic palindrome. So this is short, and this is the last thing I'll play for you today. And so again, Luigi dalla Piccola, Quaderno Musicale di Anna Libera, number 7. Thank you, everyone. And well, we have 3 minutes left for questions, please, or comments or anything. I actually finished ahead of time today for a change. Of course, I could keep playing more music if you'd rather.
Well, if anyone would like to come in, if anybody has something they'd like to share.
Thanks to everyone for being with me today. Really appreciate it. And well, I believe we're going to have session 6 in a few weeks. So,
Yes.
yeah, out of the mouths of babes. Very good.
Well, thank you, Donna. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful session, and it was so wonderful to hear you play as well. So thank you so much.
Always my pleasure. Always my pleasure. Well, thank you. Okay,
and
everyone.
we will be sending out the recording along with the date for the next session and information on that. So when the recording is ready, Donna and I will have arranged when the next session of this series will be. Thank you, Donna, for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.
Okay, good evening, good afternoon, buonasera, good morning.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.